You are now tuned in to 710 Radio. We are the newest and hottest independent radio station in Colorado and on the internet. The fans named the station. With over 1 million visitors and over 10 million hits. Oh yeah, our website is going bananas. We are the newest and the hottest. This is 710 Radio. 24/7 radio. Stay tuned and tell a friend. The Dabber's Choice. With hot shows 7 days a week.
Started from the bottom, now we're here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team fucking here. Started from the bottom, now we're here. Started from the bottom, now.
What's up, everybody? How y'all doing? Man, I want to welcome you back to my first episode on the air for a while. Man, I had to take a break, guys. Just had a lot of things go down that took me off the air for a minute. But I want to let you know I am back. I'm going to be back full-time again. So I hope you bear with me for these first couple of shows as I, kind of ease myself back into these shows. But I want to thank you guys for the ones that have stuck with me, asked me, kept up to date with me. And, while I went through this difficult time. So, I'm human. Every now and then we go through issues, lost a friend, went through a funk, a little depression, and then, man, yeah, the funk was a hard one to get out of. But, I want to thank you guys for sticking with me, being patient while, I haven't run any shows here lately. But like I said, we're back, we're going to get them back on the air. We got several shows that we will be bringing on our network. So, yeah, why don't we just go ahead and get started then? I have some interesting articles that we're going to go ahead and discuss. And the first one is from Leafly.com. And it's by Bruce Barcott, December 14th, 2016. So this is just yesterday. The new DEA rule says CBD oil is really, truly, no joke illegal. There's a note saying this article contains an update on the legal status of CBD products below the original text. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, made CBD oil a little more federally illegal and a little noticed bureaucratic maneuver this morning. Today's Federal Register, December 14, 2016, contains an item 21 CFR Part 1308 that establishes a new drug code for marijuana extract. Now you got to, it's not marijuana. They replace the J with an H, okay? And they call it marijuana extract. This code, wrote DEA Acting Administrator Chuck Rosenberg, will allow DEA and DEA registered entities to track quantities of this material separately from quantities of marijuana, the H instead of the J. The move, the register entry explained, is meant to bring the U.S. into compliance with international drug control treaties. There is no major change in the law brought about by the register item. Rather, it serves to clarify and reinforce the DEA's position on all cannabis extracts, including CBD oil. That position is, they are all federally illegal Schedule I substances, in parentheses, extracts of marijuana, the H instead of the J, will continue to be treated as a Scheduled I controlled substance, the notice says. CBD oil derived from hemp is now commonly available nationwide via websites and mail order services. Those operations survive on the assumption that cannabidol products below the legal threshold for THC percentages in hemp, which is 0.3% or less, are technically legal. Not so, says the DEA. In the DEA comment of the entry, Rosenberg directly addressed the question, well, what if it's only cannabinol, CBD, and no other cannabinoids? The agency's response, in parentheses, for practical purposes, all extracts that contain CBD will also contain at least small amounts of other cannabinoids. However, if it were possible to produce from the cannabis plant an extract that contained only CBD and no other cannabinoids, such an extract would fall within the new drug code and therefore remain federally illegal. In other words, the DEA is confident that it can find enough traces of other cannabinoids in your CBD oil to arrest and prosecute. And if they can't, they still have the option of arresting and prosecuting based on the CBD oil itself. Is your CBD derived from hemp? Doesn't matter to the DEA. The new extracts classification applies to all extracts that have been derived from any plant of the genus cannabis and which contains cannabinols and cannabidiol. Hemp is not a separate genus, although it may be a separate species. Lot of debate on that point. Legally speaking, hemp is simply cannabis with no more than 0.3% THC content. The new rule seems to clarify the DEA's position on hemp-derived CBD, which entered a legal gray area following the Congress passage of the 2014 Farm Bill. That legislation allowed certain states to grow hemp in pilot projects and blocked federal law enforcement authorities, i.e. the DEA, from interfering within state agencies, hemp growers, and agricultural research. What DEA Administrator Rosenberg seems to be saying with this clarification is, you may be able to grow hemp, but if you try to extract CBD oil from it, the DEA considers that a federal crime. The rule did not contain any hint as to when the DEA will step into the 21st century and stop using the archaic version of the word marijuana. There's an update 12/14/2016 at 2:20 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Although the DEA considers CBD oil to be federally illegal Schedule 1 drug, there are temporary safeguards in place that protect patients in many states from federal prosecution over possession of the oil. The Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment is the most important to those protections. Originally passed in 2014, the amendment to the Congressional Appropriations Bill prohibits the Justice Department from spending funds to interfere with implementation of state medical cannabis laws. It is silent on adult use laws. In August, the federal 9th U.S. Circuit Court upheld Rohrabacher-Farr in the face of a challenge brought by a federal prosecutor. Leafly has an explanation of that case here. And when I post the article on the 710 radio page or the Spreaker page, you can read the article yourself. It has a link for it. The amendment is the chief piece of legislation preventing federal law enforcement officials from prosecuting patients for possessing CBD products in the 28 legal medical cannabis states and the District of Columbia. In addition, 16 states have passed so-called CBD-only laws that allow patients and caregivers to possess the non-psychoactive CBD products. Those CBD-only laws usually allow no legal avenue to produce or obtain the products. However, Rohrabacher-Farr must be renewed every year. If it's not, its safeguards disappear. The amendment was most recently renewed last Friday, December 9th, as part of the continuing House resolution known as H.R. 2028, which funds the federal government through April 28, 2017. When that resolution expires next April, so does the protections afforded by Rohrabacher-Farr, unless it's renewed once again, which, okay, it will be, but experts in industry react. It's unclear whether today's action is a signal from the DEA to incoming Trump administration, or just a bit of shelf clearing before the DEA Administrator Rosenberg rides off into the sunset with the rest of the Obama administration. This rule, after all, finalizes a proposed rulemaking notice that first appeared more than 5 years ago on July 5th, 2011. Robert Hoban, a Colorado cannabis attorney and adjunct professor of law at the University of Denver, raised the notion that the rule itself may not be lawful. The action is beyond the DEA's authority, Hoban told Leafly in an interview late this afternoon. The DEA can only carry out the law. They cannot create it. Here, they are purporting to create an entirely new category called marijuana extracts. He used it with a J. And by doing so, wrest control over all cannabinoids. They want to call all cannabinoids illegal, but they don't have the authority to do that. The new DEA rule, Hoban said, may threaten hundreds, possibly thousands of jobs and growing businesses, and those business owners base their investments and careers on previous definitions of hemp and cannabinol in the Controlled Substance Act and modified by federal courts. And that's where this latest turn of events could end up. We will see if the federal government we will see the federal government in court, Hoban said. Now, I hope I was pronouncing his name right, and if I didn't, I apologize. It's... Oh, wow. That one's the story's got like 111 comments. Now, I like to read the comments, but I'll let you guys read them once I post the page. All right. So, what do you guys think on that subject? Because, as long as you're medical, it sounds like they're going to leave you alone, right? That is what I read. I think I read. But anyways, this is the way I look at it. They kind of said it, is this their thing about riding off into the sunset, And I believe it is, and I was kind of talking about this subject last night where I told a friend of mine that, I view that move as a temper tantrum being thrown by DEA. Because, for one, they are on their way out, and plus, look, they know they're on the losing end of this drug war. The war's almost over. So, at least for marijuana. Okay, let me. But still, they are going to fight to the very bitter end, kicking and screaming. And this was their parting shot to legalization. So, yeah, I call this them throwing a temper tantrum. They like to throw temper tantrums. So, but anyways, yeah, DEA, they need to be, I hear a lot of people that say that they need to be disbanded. Do they need to be disbanded? Boy, that's another topic for another show, I think. I would like to know your guys' thoughts, still. Alright, so I will post this one up on the page for you guys. Let's see here. Where should we go? Oh, yeah. So, kind of, I came over on the Drug Enforcement DEA website and just kind of looking at, so what are, because I didn't know what the penalties were, for certain things, and they, on their website, I am at www.dea.gov/drug-infos. Okay, so I will post this up as well. And on, let's go to the marijuana part, because they have penalties like first offense, second offense, from cocaine base, fentanyl analog, heroin, LSD, methamphetamine, PCP. I know that where's the marijuana? Oh, here we go. Okay. So, down here, so since we are talking about, all right, so I went to the part where honestly, the extracts, it's kind of like hash oil. Okay, so I'm sure once they update their website, it will have the extracts part on it. But for right now, their penalties right now, just for hash oil. This one here is like for more than 1 kilogram. 1 kilogram. How much is a kilogram? 1 kilo. That's 2.5 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. So 2.5 pounds. Huh. Okay. But the first offense on that is no more than 20 years. If death or serious bodily injury, not less than 20 years, or more than life. A fine of $1 million if an individual, or $5 million if other than an individual. So I wonder if that's like a business or a corporation or something like that. All right, so, but your second offense, not more than 30 years if death or serious bodily injury, life imprisonment, fine $2 million if an individual, $10 million if other than an individual. Interesting. Man, those are some hefty fines. Nah, but it'll be interesting to see what the new administration does. Yeah, it will be interesting. All right, so let's see here. Oh, yes. There's another article by Leafly that I thought was very interesting. What I'm doing is I'm debating on which story to do first, man, because I'm going to do this Leafly investigation first. How much butane in BHO is too much? Oh, man, that's a good question. Because I think any butane left in BHO is too much. But that's just my personal opinion, and I'm a kind of a snob when it comes to my oils and waxes, but that's just me. I don't like to taste any tane whatsoever. So, this is by Ben Adlin from December 12th, 2016, so just 3 days ago. On January 1, 2017, Colorado will raise its state-regulated limit on residual levels of volatile solvents allowed in cannabis concentrates. It's a little noticed rule change that involves dramatically increased levels of allowable solvents among the changes. The legal threshold for butane, the solvent that puts the B in BHO, will increase more than sixfold from 800 parts per million to 5,000 parts per million. Wow, I gotta tell you guys, I can't believe I gotta make some calls. I cannot believe Colorado's going to be allowing this. Okay, so allowed residuals for heptanes, another class of solvents, will go up by a factor of 10. xylenes, industrial solvents that technically aren't allowed to be used for cannabis extractions at all, will be permitted at concentrations of up to 2170 ppm, 2,170 parts per million, significantly higher than the previous limit of less than 1 part per million. Wow. The state's residual limit on benzene, perhaps the most hazardous chemical of the group, will double from less than 1 part per million to less than 2 part per million. Man, I'm having a hard time believing that they're going to allow this. They do have a chart here, and when I post it, you guys will be able to go and look at it yourself, man. I mean, so on the surface, these are staggering increases in chemicals that at some levels have been associated with nausea, irregular heartbeat, increased risk of cancer, and even death. Regulators, testing laboratory operators, and industry members in other states have expressed surprise at the changes, which we will apply to both adult use and medical markets. Mike Van Dyke, Chief of Environmental Epidemiology, Occupational Health and Toxicology Branch at Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, or CDPHE, which recommended the new limit, acknowledged that concentrates capable of clearing the regulatory hurdles could be noticeably different than what's currently allowed. Wait, what? Which recommended the... Okay. Acknowledged that the concentrates capable of clearing the regulatory hurdles could be noticeably different from what's currently allowed. Consumers are going to feel like they might taste it, he said, of new allowed butane levels. They might smell it. I'm surprised no one else has actually been interested in this, he told me in an interview last week. I'm going to stop right there because it was almost, these sentences were like almost stopping me in mid-sentence. Consumers are going to feel like they might taste it. He said of new allowed butane, they might smell it. Let me tell you what, if you smell it, oh my God, have you ever tasted what butane soup tastes like? Oh my goodness. You know right away. You're not getting high off the wax, you're getting high off the butane. And I cannot believe, for the life of me, that CDPHE would allow this. Man, I'm definitely going to have to make some phone calls. This is freaking crazy in my mind. I don't understand this. It's already bad enough. I know somebody that, they come over and smoke with me. They bring a lot of wax. We call them dabs. And, I can always tell he gets it from a dispensary that's supposed to be tested. I mean, I believe the products are supposed to be tested. And still, you get a batch coming out of there that just tastes like butane. And I always wonder, well, how in the hell did this even pass the test to get sold to the consumer? And now they're going to raise it? Wow. I mean, not only are you endangering lives, but you're endangering lives. The only reason to raise it, I'm just, is there that much bad stuff out there that you have to raise it to allow more products to be able to get out on the shelves? Inferior product for the same amount of money as if it was going to be quality. Man, that just blows my mind. Like I said, I'm going to make some phone calls, man. I'm going to... But I can tell you what, when he makes the comment, I'm surprised nobody else has actually been interested in this. I'm interested in this. because I dab. But I'm a snob, okay? I don't like to taste solvents. I want to taste my hash. I want to taste my oil. I don't want to taste solvent, okay? So if that makes me a snob, so be it. I'm a snob. I actually, respect my body, and, I actually care what I put in my body. So there's a few things CDPHE's Van Dyke wants to make clear about the new rules. Here is one. The change was not the result of any industry pressure. Really? Okay. The increase didn't come at the behest of lobbyists, he told Leafly. In fact, in the work groups, if we heard anything from the industry, I think we heard the other side, that these were too high, he said, which is an uncommon place to be. They are too high. So what's going on? The justification for the change, according to Van Dyke, is that the new limits truly follow the best currently available medical and scientific guidance. This was reevaluation based on trying to make things health-based, he explained. These numbers came from the International Harmonized Guidelines for Residual Solvents in Pharmaceuticals. Van Dyke is referring to a published scientific article he cited in a July letter to Jim Burrick, director of the Colorado Department of Revenue's Enforcement Division, which is in charge of enforcing the new standards. Van Dyke provided the letter and spoke at length to Leafly about the coming change. I apologize. When these numbers stand test of time, I don't know, he said. We're open to new data that comes out, but our goal is to make sure that we maintain the best we can, the best evidence-based regulations for health. Boy. Then how come the numbers go up? How come the numbers are going up? Best evidence-based regulation for health. Don't we have to go back up here when it says xylene, industrial solvents that technically aren't allowed to be used for cannabis extractions at all, will be permitted to concentrations up to 2,170 parts per million. All right. There's a reason that it's not supposed to be used at all. Now you're going to double it, and then you come down here and you say the best evidence-based, where was it? Based regulations for health. Yeah, for some reason I'm not following you here. I got problems with this. And honestly, if you're an oil or a concentrate user, you should have a problem with this too. This is your health, your lives that you're talking about. When deaths are oh my God, are you crazy? No way. And let me tell you, a butane headache is the worst, man. A butane, oh yeah, it's right away. You taste the back of your throat, the back of your tongue, your head. You get an instant headache. Yeah, you're getting a butane hit. And that's gross. I just want to keep you guys safe, man. Because dabbing can be a good experience. A nice experience but you got to dab responsibly. This is not, in my terms, responsible legislation or rules or whatever, regulations, man. I'm telling you, that's bullshit. But anyways, the agency is trying to do precisely what's been asked, Van Dyke said. Legislation passed this year, House Bill 16-1261, put CDPHE in charge of recommending testing standards based on medical reports and published scientific literature. When the Colorado Department of Revenue set the previous limits in the wake of Amendment 64's passage, it was a fast and furious process, Van Dyke said. There were times you come up with numbers because that's what you came up with at that time. Despite the eye-popping increase, he said, new limits adhere more strictly to the latest available evidence in scientific research. They'll have a chart here basically shows you what we were talking about: butane, heptane, benzene, toluene, hexane, and xylenes. But like the butane, previous limits was 800 parts per million. Now it's 5,000 parts per million. That's a 525% increase. You know what I mean? This toluene here, this is, I don't know what that is. I've never used it. So, so it's going to be 1 part per million on the previous limit, going up to 890 parts per million. That's an 88,900% increase. Total xylenes, 1 part per million for previous limits, 2,170 parts per million. That's for new limits, and that's 216,900% increase. Whoa! My goodness, that's crazy. Comparison shopping. Other jurisdictions have set residual solvents limits lower than Colorado. Berkeley, California limits total combined residual solvents at 400 parts per million. Wow. Total combined 400 parts per million. Wow. That just kind of blew me away a little bit. Okay, Oregon, on the other hand, set standards similar to Colorado, but with more solvents identified. In a report explaining its own rulemaking process, the Oregon Health Authority cited the same international pharmaceutical standards as Van Dyke's letter did. Washington, which was initially silent on residual solvent levels, has considered limits as low as 500 parts per million butane and 0.1 part per million benzene. Regulators are currently proposing the state adopt higher limits that match those now embraced by Oregon and Colorado. After a public comment period, the new Washington limits are set to take effect in late February. Frankly, we're not saying that extracted marijuana products should have 5,000 parts per million of butane in them, Van Dyke in Colorado said. What we're saying is 5,000 is a health-based limit. Very interesting comment. But he did just acknowledge the possibility of literally smelling butane in BHO approved by state for medical patients. I think there might... Oh, God, that just blows... Oh, man, that blows me away. I think there may be a lot of the market drivers that push those numbers lower, Van Dyke acknowledged. And smell can certainly be one of them. But he repeated, it's not from a health perspective that those numbers should be lower. Then what should it? But are residual solvents merely a matter of product taste and quality, or is it scientific research still too limited to inspire consumer confidence? It may be a little of both. Well, let me tell you what. There is some studies out there. The government likes to call them, those are just anecdotal. Well, let me tell you what, I'm a little bit more on the side of listening to that anecdotal talk than the government's talk because, for one, if a guy told me, man, I've been smoking for a while and, I came across this batch that had this butane in there and it was so bad that it fucked my lungs up, and I had to go to the hospital because the headache was just horrendous and I was throwing up and, oh man, it was horrible. I think I'm gonna, listen to that guy, I think, I'm gonna believe him that, the butane was bad for him, and it's gonna make me be a little bit more cautious on my oil and wax and stuff. Okay, a knowledge problem. A lot of eyes widen when I talk to people who weren't aware of Colorado's new standards. Some consumers believe that industrial solvents are inherently hazardous to their health. which they should, and should be avoided at virtually any level. I agree. Many concentrate consumers now opt for solventless extracts such as rosin or bubble hash. Others don't worry as much, pointing out accurately, according to most scientists I talk to, that someone who smells a whiff of butane from a big lighter has already inhaled way more than they get in a day of dabbing. It's not the butane, said Nick Mosley, a co-owner and chief science officer at Confidence and Analytics, a cannabis testing laboratory in Washington State. The butane is really not a huge health risk, he said, adding, it takes quite a bit, way more than you'd get from dabbing or a vape pen, to cause serious harm such as liver damage. Yeah, okay. But what is going to get affected before the liver, the lungs, the nervous system, before it even hits the liver? You know, I mean, I'll give him credit for a half-correct statement. Okay. A 1981 study cited by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services found that exposure to 10,000 parts per million for 10 minutes may lead to drowsiness, but doesn't appear to cause systemic effects in humans. The average dab consists of about 10 milligrams to 20 milligrams of concentrate. Mosley at Confidence Analytics said, in his eyes of Colorado regulators, he added, these Class 3 solvents are not cause for concern at 5,000 parts per million when the dose of substance is so low. Mosley did call the levels of xylenes and benzenes in Colorado concerning. The issue with xylenes and benzene, he explained, is that the contaminants are unintentionally there. In other words, those chemicals aren't part of the extraction process. Those chemicals are sometimes used to clean equipment and may inadvertently become part of the final product. They're also sometimes found in low-quality solvents. In other words, they're contaminants in the contaminant. Okay. Mosley, it makes sense. Mosley wasn't trying to criticize Colorado's new limits from a health perspective, though he didn't sound especially jazzed about the idea of finding those residual levels in a concentrate either. Neither do I. He just meant that a higher but soon-to-be legal level of residuals could indicate careless extraction methods or low-quality products. Man, I'm 100% with you on this one, Mosley. 100%. I agree. It concerns me. There is no question that these solvents at certain levels are dangerous. Many at high concentrations or over long periods of exposure have been linked to all sorts of negative health conditions, ranging from irregular heartbeat and nausea to cancer and bone marrow failure. Most are tightly regulated in other contexts. Consider benzene. The U.S. EPA limit the chemical concentration in drinking water, for example, to 0.005 parts per million. That's 5 parts per billion, while the Occupational Safety and Health Administration limits workplace exposure to 0.005 parts per million. Colorado's limit in concentrate, by contrast, is 2 parts per million, twice the previous level, but most modest increase of the bunch. But there's a familiar problem. There's been essentially zero research into these solvents into the context of cannabis. As a BuzzFeed headline put it last year, wax is weed's next big thing, and no one knows if it's safe. The claim might be sensational, but it contains an important grain of truth. When regulators in industry try to keep residual solvents level low, it's not because they know exactly about how those chemicals behave when you vaporize them. Nobody's really studied that. Most Americans in 2016 still think dabbing is a style of dance. Well, hey, okay. The effect of xylene on the nervous system from 100 to 200 parts per million. Symptoms are going to be nausea and headache. 200 to 500 parts per million, you'll be feeling high with dizziness, weakness, irritability, vomiting, slow reaction time. 800 to 10,000 parts per million, giddiness, confusion, clumsiness, slurred speech, loss of balance, ringing in the ears. Over 10,000 parts per million, sleepiness, loss of consciousness, death. The sources from the Journal of Oral and Maxillofacial Pathology available at, oh my goodness, you'll have to, but anyways, agencies that do try to pin residual solvent levels to publish scientific data are extrapolating from all different kinds of information. Extrapolating, okay, from all different kinds of information. Sometimes it comes from research into solvent exposure among industrial workers. In Colorado and Oregon, health agencies look to how pharmaceutical production guidelines dealt with residual levels. Jeffrey Raber is one of the most respected voices in the cannabis testing industry. He runs the Pasadena-based testing lab. The workshop has worked to help educate regulatory bodies in 8 states on testing issues. He feels that relying on pharmaceutical guidelines misses an important point. While some solvents might be necessary to make life-saving drugs in a pharmaceutical context, not all solvents are crucial to cannabis extraction, and I believe that as well. In cannabis, you know that you can utilize things that are much more physiologically benign, Raber said. You're not forced to use benzene. This puts the cannabis industry in somewhat of an unusual position. Existing best practices for cannabis extraction far outstrip Colorado's new regulatory limits. If anything, the new regulations might be seen as discouraging best practices. Yeah, I mean, why? It only makes sense. You know, if you set the bar, make these guys get, I'm sorry, we need the cleanest wax and oil possible. It's your money that you're paying good money for this product. I want 100% oil and wax. I don't want it like 90% oil, 10% solvent. I'm sorry, get that 10% out of there. It can be done. Yes, I believe it does discourage best practices. Because now I think the argument to that Van Dyke says is we're setting health-based standards. I ran that response by Raber. His perspective makes sense. He replied, the regulators always worry they are going to revoke someone's license based on the regulations. He replied, the regulators always worry they are going to revoke someone's license based on the regulations. When it comes to protecting consumers, Raber said, can't you err on the side of caution, though? I agree. My goodness. People's lives are at stake. Is it worth worrying? Knowing how to react to Colorado's new testing limits requires a clear understanding of how residual solvents behave. We don't have complete clarity on that yet, but there are some things consumers might consider as they decide how to respond to the new change. Nearly all commercial concentrate producers in Colorado now consistently comply with the existing lower limits on residual solvents, said Janine McMahon, owner of CMT Laboratories in Denver. McMahon, a member of the Colorado working group that devised the new limits, doesn't expect extractors to drop their quality level. They've already figured it out, she said. I don't believe that they would willingly allow more butane to sit in the sample. You're right. The ones that have figured it out, that's the thing. The ones that have figured it out will keep their game up. Yes, I 100% believe that. But, the ones that haven't figured it out can do the most damage. That's why I think those lower limit numbers are needed until these guys can get it figured out. Once they get it figured out, fine, hey, But until then, yeah, get your craft, get your craft figured out. Get your game up. So, if someone is really trying to do right by the medical market, they would be doing the best not to be using butane, McMahon said. But the market needs to drive that, not the regulators. When new evidence does come along, Van Dyke said Colorado regulators will be ready to adapt. We have the ability to change those regulations as new data comes out and as new issues emerge, he said. State regulators are aware of the data gaps. We don't have a good concept of what is an average and what is a maximal consumption of a concentrate by a user, Van Dyke said. On that front, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment played it safe, assuming a use rate of 10 grams of extract per day. Wow. Okay. Even the heaviest of concentrate consumers rarely top more than 2 grams per day. Why Colorado limits matter. What happens in Colorado often sets the standards for other emerging legal markets and state regulatory systems. Jane Stewart, marketing manager for SC Labs, a Santa Cruz-based testing labs, sees the effect in California because we live in a state that is unregulated. California is oftentimes looking to Colorado, Oregon, or Washington, states that may have regulatory bodies in place that are a little bit ahead of us, she said. When I told her about Colorado's new standards, she seemed surprised. She goes, I wonder how all the regulators came to those decisions, she said. I would love to know more. It would be very important to my business. SC Labs is a major player in California. It was the lab responsible for testing all concentrate entries in this year's Emerald Cup, a longtime growers fair in the heart of California's Emerald Triangle. This past weekend, the Cup hosted an estimated 30,000 visitors at its annual event. I asked Stewart what a typical residual solvent level might be for a concentrate entered in the Cup. Results are posted online. Her response made clear that some of the cannabis world's savviest consumers have already moved beyond BHO. The Emerald Cup is a solventless competition, she said simply. That's the end of that article. Is Colorado behind California? And, because she said that, she made the comment about, she feels behind, California's behind Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. So, I don't know. It makes me wonder if we're not the ones that are behind. So, that was a very interesting article, man. Personally, I don't want to taste that butane. I don't want to taste hexane. And you should be concerned about that, I thought this was a very interesting article. So, let's see here. Whoops. Clicked the wrong button here. Okay, so we got time for one more story. And I guess I'm going to go ahead and talk about this next one here. DenverPost.com. The article is Colorado lawmakers plan to crack down on home pot growers. Then Hickenlooper says turning up enforcement will help preserve legal pot sales under the new president. Oh, okay. This is by Kristen Wyatt from the Associated Press, and it was published just 2 days ago, December 7th at 1 p.m. But it was updated December 8th at 8:21 a.m. Okay, so hoping to preserve its marijuana law under the next president, Colorado is planning a state legislation designed to crack down on pot that is grown legally but then sold on the black market. The goal is to cut down on complaints that Colorado liberals' allowances for growing pot without a license has created a thriving network of illegal growers. Colorado allows medical pot patients to grow up to 99 plants, far beyond other marijuana states, and it also allows recreational group users to group their allotted 6 plants into massive co-ops, entire greenhouses of pot that aren't tracked or taxed. Okay, well, they just said it right there, that aren't tracked or taxed. I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of the article, and then I'm going to put my 2 cents in, okay? So, Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper says the state's generous pot allowances make it almost impossible for cops to tell legitimate growers from black market fronts, and he is calling for several new laws to crack down. Proposals include a ban on group recreational pot grows and new paperwork requirement for people who grow medical pot. With uncertainty looming about how the next president will approach marijuana, Colorado regulators say it's time to ramp up efforts to crush the black market and show the feds that Colorado isn't letting weed seep into other states. Okay. We do need to clean up the system and make sure we're beyond reproach for how we will. Okay, they got a misprint here, so that kind of threw me off a little bit. And we got to clean up this system and make sure we are beyond reproach for how we're regulating marijuana, said Andrew Friedman, the governor's marijuana coordinator. Colorado has been sued by 2 neighboring states, Nebraska and Oklahoma, for allegedly not keeping marijuana within its own borders. That lawsuit was dismissed by the U.S. Supreme Court, but neighboring states continue to gripe that Colorado's friendly reminders at airports and interstate highways aren't sufficient to keep marijuana out of their states. Friedman points to 6 large criminal raids in the last 2 years of evidence that black market pot dealers are exploiting the state. The most recent case happened this fall when federal agents and local law enforcement simultaneously raided a dozen homes in southwest Colorado, seizing 22,400 pounds of marijuana. Investigators say that weed was intended to be taken out of state. We're hearing from federal officials, "Hey, listen, this is a concern," Friedman said. The governor's plans outline the lawmakers in advance of the 2017 legislative session include a statewide 12-plant limit in private homes, which is still more generous than other marijuana states such as California, which is 6 plants, and Washington, 4 plants before having to register with the state. Some of Colorado's largest jurisdictions, including Denver and Colorado Springs, already have those 12-plant limits through local ordinances, so it's not clear how many people would be affected by this new limit. The governor also wants lawmakers to ban collective recreational grows and to require caregivers to keep track of their plants and where they go. But Colorado has tried cracking down on marijuana caregivers before with limited success. Colorado's pot laws are in the state's constitution, so residents literally have constitutional rights to high plant count and to designate other grow plants for them. And to designate others to grow plants for them. Hickenlooper's plans are already running into sharp criticism from marijuana activists who say Colorado is simply trying to boost taxes by making it increasingly hard to grow pot instead of buying it from the store. They're trying to do the best they can to drive everyone into taxed model, said Jason Wharf, head of the Southern Colorado Cannabis Council, which represents pot retailers, patients, caregivers who grow pot for sick people. Some limits on caregivers have already been approved. Starting in January, caregivers will need to register with the state, a reaction to law enforcement complaints that they have no way of knowing whether a pot grower is actually growing for legitimate patients. Bullshit. Terry Robnett, head of the Cannabis Patient Alliance, called on Colorado to wait for the already in the works limits to take effect before passing more regulations. We continue to restrict and not see how anything is working, Robnett said. That is the end of that story. Okay. I do want to come back up. I'm going to kind of go backwards on this article. All right. This article says Colorado has tried cracking down on marijuana caregivers before. Yes, they have. And actually, caregivers have been in the line of fire since the beginning of medical marijuana. So, you're right. Colorado pot laws are in the state constitution. So, we, as medical marijuana patients and residents, literally have our constitution backing us. And plus, we have court cases to back everything. We've won many, many cases. So, we've got rules for caregivers. We've made the rules. The rules have been in place for a long time. This 12-plant limit in private homes. Okay, I can see that for, a recreational grower. But if you're a medical marijuana patient with a higher plant count, I guarantee you have a court case on your hands. And if I were, the medical marijuana patients here in Colorado, man, I would band together. Everybody throw $10 into the damn pot. And let's do a class action lawsuit. This is a fighting. You cannot limit a medical marijuana patient. It is our constitutional right. I don't care what they say about, Dr. Plant counts. Because that can be, argued in court as well. Oh, my goodness, man. So the fight goes on again. Us caregivers in Colorado, we should be used to this right now. This is old tactics just being tried in modern day time, it kind of, in a previous, it says Friedman points to 6 large criminal raids in the last 2 years as evidence that black market pot dealers are exploiting the state. All right. They're saying black market pot dealers. Why are they lumping us caregivers into with these black market pot dealers? What are they trying to say that these black market pot dealers are the caregivers? Well, I don't know. I'm just asking a question. If you're legal, you got the paperwork. I don't understand how they're saying, how they're going to say who's legit and who isn't, because of the rules and regulations. That's how they're going to know. If you're a caregiver, you're going to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. And if you don't, I kind of suggest that you get to that point. You know, for people that know about my case, you know, I already won a case against the state of Colorado. And it changed laws for medical necessity. And I kept my case open for lottie-dottie any damn body to follow its blueprint. You know, and let me tell you, that medical necessity is written in stone in the courts. You know, an example, you know, they put a 12 plant saying that we can only grow 12 plants. Well, medical necessity says I need my 48. So who do you think is going to win in court? You know, I've already proved that I needed it for medical necessity once. Why do I have to prove it again? I mean, nothing's changed. None of the circumstances have changed. It's going to be interesting to see what the state does, what the reaction is, and how they deal with the caregiver growth. I mean, I really want to know what their plans are now to what they're going to be doing. From this point, since medical marijuana has been enacted, and even when A64 was enacted, they have shown that they have no qualms throwing the medical marijuana patients and caregivers under the bus. So I really want to know what their meaning of a black market pot dealer are, because it almost sounds like that's what they are classifying caregivers. Hopefully I'm wrong. I really hope I am. I hope I'm off on the, you know, just so far off that, but the state's generous pot allowances make it almost impossible for cops to tell legitimate growers from black market fronts. And he is calling for several new laws to crack down. You know, we already have plenty of laws, plenty of rules, regulations. I don't see we're adding more. Several new laws are going to help with the crackdown. The police departments already get money from the marijuana division, you know, marijuana fund. What more do you want? I don't understand. If we're caregivers, that's one thing. Black market pot dealers, fine. If you're going to go after them, but leave us caregivers alone. And it doesn't matter, because like I said, so what if they have 99 plants? I don't care. Medical necessity. That right there is something that I want to be clear on this, because I don't want to say the wrong thing. Not all patients, caregivers grow the same way. Some grow small plants, and some grow perpetual cycle. Some grow soil, some grow hydro, they do what they can. I mean, not everybody grows the same. Who are they to, the caregiver or the grower, that should determine what he needs to grow for himself and his patients, and to be able to supply them and himself with their needs and his needs, or her needs. Excuse me, I didn't mean to leave out the ladies. But 365 days a year, all right? And then when they get into excess, what is excess? When you're talking medical marijuana, and you're talking, there's no excess. I'm sorry. I refuted that one and won myself. So, you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't like this article whatsoever. I'm telling you guys, we got a fight on our hands coming up. I already see it within this article. You know, why they lumped us in with those black market pot dealers kind of baffles my mind a little bit. But, hey, it is what it is. We'll fight. You know, we fought so far, you know, and we'll fight more. You know, I mean, they've proven that we can never give up our guard. You know, we can't let our guard down, and we can't give up the fight. So when they say that entire greenhouses of pot that aren't tracked or taxed, well, the state of Colorado kind of cut their nose off, spite their face when it came to that issue there. because I remember during the time when this was going down in the early beginnings, when we were talking about taxes, we had a bunch of caregivers that were ready to start paying taxes and were thrilled to start paying taxes. And they didn't want our money. Oh, okay. No problem. We'll keep it. And whose fault was that? Then you said that we can't make sales. Okay, well, if we don't make sales, then there's no taxes on 0%. What are you going to tax on 0%, sales tax? I'm sorry. You guys, in your infinite wisdom, trying to weed out the drug dealers from the caregivers, you got a system right now. So I don't understand this article, but hey, once again, this was by Kristen Wyatt from the Associated Press, man, off of DenverPost.com, and I will post this page up on the 710 Radio Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, all the spots. All right, so, oh man, well, we're almost running out of time here, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Hope you enjoyed today's show, man. I'd like to know what you think about any of these stories that I've done. I'll be back here in a couple of days. We'll get something going, and yeah, hope you enjoyed the show. Until then, you guys have a blessed day. And remember, man, 710 Radio, the dabber's choice, but remember to dab wisely and stay hydrated. That is the key. You guys have a great day. Peace.